How's it going, ladies and germs? This is your old pal CHH. Come on in. So I was looking at the movie shelves earlier, and I was like, I want to kind of do some more physical media of kind of like videos where I'm showing like lists of stuff. That way people have some options if they're interested in maybe looking at some titles to purchase, things like that. And I was kind of looking at my shelves, and I was like, I actually want to talk about, like, I was looking at my Scream Factory collection, which obviously kind of grabs the eyes because you've got a bunch of titles over there. And I was like, all the releases that were not special editions or the non-slip editions, like, I actually have a lot of titles. And, like, if you were going to ask me, like, Christian, give me, like I'm getting into physical media, like, when it comes to Scream Factory, what are some titles you recommend? The reality is, like, a lot of the titles that I think I'd recommend would actually, like, not be collector's edition version. A lot of them would just be, like, some of those little releases that got slipped through. So what I did is I pulled out some, and I tell you guys this, if you like this, I could definitely do another one because, like, there was a lot to choose from. And I was like, yeah, let me pull some aside so I could talk about them. Gives me a chance to talk about some, I think, gems in a way, and that sort of thing. So I'm going to show you guys 10 here. I've got one as a bonus. And if one of these actually did have a slip, I do apologize. Obviously, it would be something that was probably impossible to get with a slip, but I'm pretty sure most of these were just regular editions that were put out, that sort of thing. So, guys, with that being said, I'm going to start with this bonus because the thing that Scream Factory kind of does sometimes is this... They'll put something out as a limited to release. Now this one sold out. They did more, which magically people were like, "Oh, I thought you could only do 1,500." And I only recommend this because of how good it really was. But that is Unlawful Entry, y'all. This movie was so good. It actually spawned me wanting to do a whole video on how I changed my mind on 90s horror, and I do accept psychological thriller as the next iteration of what the horror genre became. I just look at it now as like, maybe that was the grunge to, monster and slasher movies of the 80s. That's the grunge to their hair metal, and that's just the evolution of it. I know it's not, monster movies or anything with these psychological thrillers, but I mean, they certainly get the blood pumping, like the same way a lot of the horror movies did. But my point is, I do love this movie. It's really, really good. I really think you should, if it's reasonably priced, like maybe I wouldn't spend more than $35 to $40, really, because at the end of the day, it's just a Blu-ray release. There's actually some really good special features on here, to be honest with you, which makes it even weirder that they made it so limited because they went out of their way to get, retrospectives with the director, interviews with him. The cinematographer gets an interview on here. The sound design guy gets an interview on here. There's retrospective interviews. Like, it's weird that they actually went out of their way to make a lot of special features for this. Like, look, they got a lot of new. So you see they did new stuff for it. Why make it so limited? Hopefully you can get this at a reasonable price. I just really recommend it. It's Kurt Russell's married. There's this horrible break-in at the house. This cop shows up, which is Ray Liotta showing up. And what happens is Ray's kind of like infatuated with Kurt's wife. So he uses his cop job as to an advantage to like kind of just bend the law and not get in trouble for being a creep and trying to infestate himself in their lives. It was a good movie, really good movie, nail biter, and it's one of those movies that's clever enough to where it doesn't need to trick you, the audience. It's just like, how is Kurt gonna stop this guy? So really good. I really recommend it. It kind of blew me away. This is actually one of my favorite movies I've seen this year from a boutique label for the first time. Was Unlawful Entry. So huge recommend for that, guys. Just kind of keep your eyes peeled on that. This next one, guys, is actually a really cool movie. This is called Body Parts. This is from 1991, stars Jeff Fahey. This kind of came out, and I didn't really hear a whole lot of buzz for it when it came out. I naturally was just kind of heavy into Scream Factory at the time, so I was looking into it. But let me read you just the plot synopsis of this. Bill Krushnak is a criminal psychologist who loses his arm in nearly his life in a grisly car accident. A daring medical operation follows in which a donor's arm is successfully grafted onto Bill's body, but after the operation, the arm starts to take on a violent life of its own, striking out against Bill's wife and children. Consumed by fears about his dangerous behavior, Bill is driven to learn that the donor's identity and makes a horrifying discovery that delivers him into a world of unimaginable terror. Written, directed by Eric Reed, this movie stars Jeff Fahey and Brad Dourif. So great cast right there, and I know it sounds a little hokey, but I assure you it wasn't. It was actually done really, really well. But I mean, people know Jeff Fahey obviously from like, The Lawnmower Man, and then you have him in Psycho 3 with Don't Watch the Guitar. But I really think if you're going to watch a Jeff Fahey movie, guys, I think this may be the best one. Brad Dourif obviously does not hurt being in here as well. I just realized, is his last name Dorif or Dorif? I hear it said both ways, so then naturally I say it both ways. Let's go with Dorif. Okay, let's go with Brad Dourif. Then that kind of falls out of my mouth easier. I don't know if it falls out of your mouth easier that way. We're going to call him Dourif, okay? So this was 1991. Like I said, this came out like a few years ago, and there wasn't a whole lot of excitement. I do remember this. I do remember a couple people being upset that they were just bringing this movie out. It wasn't a special edition or anything like that. They put it out. People were like, why is this not a collector's edition, blah, blah, blah. But my thing is just like, hey, I have the movie. This is really cool. I can catalog the movie. And this is also during a time where Scream Factory was not going super, super cheap with their cases. My pet peeve, guys, I'm all about recycling. I do my part, like I really do. But my thing is, when it comes to my Blu-ray cases, those ones with the recyclables, they're so brittle that they will break just from normal everyday use. They snap. There's so much bend and give to them that the cases can crack when you bring. They're just a mess. This Scream Factory kind of started doing that a little bit with some of their cases, but thankfully this was before that, so it was the solid Blu-ray cases. So I don't know if you buy it now if it'll have those in there, but my point is, like, this feels good in the hand. It has a little bit of bite to it. You know, if you squeeze it, it doesn't feel like it's going to break so much. That's besides the point. My point is body parts. When you look at early 90s horror, I put this up very, very high. I think it's a sensational movie. I highly recommend Body Parts. Yeah. I don't know a whole lot of people that know that when I talk about that one. All right, guys, this next one comes from one of my favorite directors of all time, which is the great Larry Cohen. Obviously, Larry Cohen, known for the stuff, Cue the Winged Serpent, God Told Me To, all that stuff. So, long story short, when In Search of Darkness started, right, when it first came out, Larry Cohen was on it. And naturally what I think they did is because they had certain directors that were a part of the documentary, they would kind of delve a little bit into super, super hidden gems. This movie was something I had never seen before. I saw Larry Cohen talking about it. That is Full Moon High. Now, listen, I adore Full Moon High. Here's the best way I can describe Full Moon High. I get really, really bummed out when people show their pictures of their collections, stuff like that on the shelf there. Here's my Scream Factory. I never see Full Moon High on there. I never see it. So what is Full Moon High? Full Moon High is basically Teen Wolf, right? But give it Caddyshack humor. It's very raunchy humor. It is so funny. And I forget the actor's name, but the boyfriend of Jamie Lee Curtis from Halloween H2O, that guy, he's the Full Moon High werewolf. So I really love this movie. This is a classic Larry Cohen film. It's very funny. I mean, and I think it's legitimately funny. It's not like cringy funny. It's not like, oh, it's charming. How I could say, oh, this was funny back in the day. I still think it's really funny. It's very sex crazed. There's funny scenarios in here. There's a really charming scene where you guy gets bit by the werewolf, and the werewolf designs are really they're kind of cute, to be honest with you. I kind of like the look of the wolf in this. But this was a really fun, energetic 80s horror comedy. I'd say it's horror in the theme of the werewolf and stuff like that, but obviously it's a very comedic film, but I love it so much. I think if you're a fan of Teen Wolf, you'll love Full Moon High. And if you're a fan of Caddyshack, you'll really love Full Moon High. So it's a movie that I just hope to push on to people a little bit more. I'd like to see it in people's collections a little bit. Yeah, really, really cool. No reverse art on that, but the disc art is great, and they just put the original classic poster on there of Full Moon High. I love it. I can't get enough of that. So please, somebody watching this, do me a favor. Do it for me. Do it for old CHH, and give it the old college try, all right? So next one, this was a movie that was recommended to me from the audience probably 2 or 3, no, it's probably longer than that. Time flies so much. I might have been 28 at the time, so I'm 32 now. That was probably like 4 years ago. It was a while back, but you know, this was recommended to me. I was telling people, I was like, listen, like, I want to watch more 90s horror. I've seen a ton. I know I have. I've got a pretty good repertoire, as it were, of 90s horror. I've watched a lot of stuff. I've seen some deep stuff, cut stuff now, like The Borrower and things like that. But people were like, Christian, you love Tobe Hooper, right? I was like, who doesn't love Tobe Hooper? He's like, dude, you need to see The Mangler. I was like, what the hell is The Mangler? So I looked into it. It does have a Scream Factory Blu-ray. And this is it right here, guys. The Mangler from Scream Factory. This was 95, I believe. Now, the cast of this was 94. 94, 95. It's somewhere around there. The cast of this is great because it's directed by Tobe Hooper. Robert Englund's in here. This is a short story by Stephen King. And it's got Buffalo. I get it confused because of Joe Dirt and Silence of the Lambs. Buffalo Bill, right, is the real one. Buffalo Bob was from Joe Dirt. So Buffalo Bill, not Bob, not Shao Kahn from Mortal Kombat 2. Buffalo Bill, that guy, he is actually, it's so weird because he's the detective of this movie. He's a good guy, and it's so weird seeing him play a good guy because he's so evil in Silence of the Lambs. But the Mangler is really entertaining. So it's all about these women. They're in this big dry cleaning factory, and there's this huge machine that I think is nicknamed the Mangler, if memory serves. And it's this thing that sucks in bed sheets and stuff and super dries them. And this woman, at the beginning of the movie, this woman's doing her thing, and somehow she gets pulled into the machine, and she gets, and then they have a maniacal boss played by Robert Englund, he's just this tyrant, like work, and he looks over the top. They made him look like almost like a crazed version. He's like a crazed looking version of the Monopoly guy, like in a way. Like he's dressed really nice, but he looks gnarly. It was a good movie. It's good in the sense that like it's like if you're in for the mood for the 90s horror and checking stuff out, man, this is like the 90s horror done by 80s horror fans, that sort of thing. And I really liked it. I mean, it was a good movie for sure. I don't want to spoil too much more about it. But this was a 2K scan of the original camera negative and the unrated cut too. So yeah, it was a movie I never saw growing up. I hadn't heard of it, and I didn't even know that Scream Factory put it out. So big recommend from me on the Mangler. Check that out. This was an Anant Singh production. I don't know about that, but like I said, it's a short story by Stephen King, directed by Tobe Hooper, that has Robert Englund in it. You really can't go that wrong with that. So I do recommend that one big time. All right, guys, so this next one is a movie I will always sing its praises. People think I'm joking when I say I legitimately like this film. I'll get messages like LOL, blah, blah. But the reality is, trust me when I say it's actually a pretty good movie. The movie in question is Piranha II: The Spawning. As far as I know, this never had a slipcover. I don't think it did. If it did, I apologize. Listen, hear me out. James Cameron directed Piranha II: The Spawning. He did get fired from the movie. There's a lot of speculation why he got fired. Roger Corman talked a little bit about it, but he was pretty vague before he passed away on Charles Ben's podcast. Now, James Cameron talked about this on Howard Stern, but he just basically said he got fired. He also talked about how he got the job for Piranha II. He was working on, maybe it was Galaxy of Terror or one of the old Corman productions from the early 80s or mid-70s, not my early 80s, but my point was he was a PA on there, but he was also like trying to help out with stuff, and he was really good at solving a problem, which sounds like by the Martin Scorsese school, solving problems is big on becoming a director. If you're a director is a problem solver in a lot of ways, right? As well as a producer would be, but so he got the job from like being a real good handyman on, I believe it was Galaxy of Terror. Let's just go with that. But you know, he got the job from being really handy on that movie to doing Piranha 2, but something happened and he got fired, and the movie was finished by somebody else, but it's still marketed as directed by James Cameron. He did 2 weeks of directing on this, which honestly was probably the majority of the film because this was a Corman production. God knows they weren't filming for more than a month. Probably 3.5 weeks, I had to guess. But here's the kicker. Piranha 2 actually has a really good story. The acting is sensational in it. Lance Henriksen performs in this movie. There's actually some good depth to everything. It's just interesting that it's a movie that has literally flying piranha that attack. And, like, it's hokey, but it's like, it shouldn't be this good. But with all that being said, I frequent Piranha 2 quite often. I watch it about once a year, and I think it's really good. I much prefer it over Piranha, which could be sacrilege. I love Joe Dante's Piranha. But Piranha 2 is an actual movie, and I just think people, naturally, they look at the cover and they say to themselves, I can't, no. But I swear I'm not being facetious, legitimately give this a shot. If you don't believe me, I'm sure you could stream it, but check it out. But I really love this movie. This was a good Blu-ray release. There wasn't much in terms of special features, which doesn't surprise me considering it's like Lance Henriksen and then it's directed by James Cameron. They're certainly not going to get Cameron to talk about this. But if you can get this cheap, I'd say for $20 or less, definitely go for it. I mean, I think I even paid $24.99 because I streamed it and I loved it so much. I went on eBay, Amazon, and it was like, I'm buying it. It was $24.99. I didn't care because I was so excited to own it. I liked it so much. But my point is, guys, give it the old college try for me. I think you'll actually enjoy it. So, moving on, guys, when it comes to 90s horror, there's movies that really push the decade forward, and there's also movies that feel like they could have been 80s movies, but they have that natural 90s feel in terms of the style, the look of the characters. And one of the best movies like that is definitely Brain Scan. I'll be honest with you, I do think this movie was deserving of the bells and whistles during the heyday of Scream Factory's Blu-ray run, for sure. You know, you got Edward Furlong in here, and the guy who is the Trickster, the guy who plays Trickster. I mean, it really is a surprise to me that this never became a franchise. But at the same time, I think understand why. Right movie, wrong time. We were on the cusp of, the big Scream run, which was going to bring things to a new era for sure. But I almost feel like if you look at 94, 95, guys, could you almost equate that to the video game crash of the early 80s? I talked about this on the Halloween and Texas Chainsaw Massacre Atari deal, which was an awesome video. If you guys haven't seen it, I think that's the best video I ever made. I really implore you to check that out. If you don't, even if you don't agree, just watch it for me and check that video out. But my point is, you look at 94, 95, it's like, I feel like that's really the ruts of everything going on. Those are only a few of the big bands were hanging on that were, they were still selling records, that sort of thing. 94, 95, like, I'm trying to think of like the big stuff that was like really, really horror down to the gritty DNA of it. And I'm thinking, it's like, well, no, during that time it was movies like Seven and things like that. But what kind of 80s style horror movie was carrying the torch during that time? Kind of Leprechaun, but it was almost a farce compared to what it was a decade ago. It was looked at as a joke. It was silly. Chucky had taken a break by that point, I believe. We weren't going to get Bride for a few more years. I think 91 was the last. So, yeah, Brain Scan kind of fell into a point where nobody was paying attention, I think. Obviously, for the kids, I'm sure, and it might have done pretty good on VHS. All that being said, if you haven't seen this movies, guys, a perfect example of a 90s horror movie that has the bones and DNA and feel of like something from the 80s, which I think is great. And Trickster, the guy who plays Trickster, was that Frank Langella that actually played him? No. T. Ryder Smith. I don't know why they don't have his name on the front. They have Frank Langella's name on the front. They should have T's on the front because Trickster is awesome and kind of freaky. So, yeah, and I think it's also one of Edward's best movies as well. This was really right before he kind of started, having some issues, unfortunately. I'm hoping he's doing okay now. But all right, let's move on because I'm rambling. Next up, probably the most underrated of all the movies I'm about to show you. If you don't buy anything, guys, listen to me. If you don't pick up any of these movies, pick this one up. I guarantee you'll like it. That is The Resurrected. This is a Dan O'Bannon film that stars Chris Sarandon. It is an H.P. Lovecraft movie. It is scored by Richard Band. If you guys listened to my interview I did with Richard Band, we talked about this movie in detail. Sensational movie. This is one of my favorite H.P. Lovecraft films. This movie came out from Scream Factory and caught no attention. None whatsoever. 1991, and it's weird, right? Because I feel like this, when you watch it, it's one of those movies where I think if you watch it, you'll say to yourself, wow, this was really good. Why was this not a bigger deal? Come to find out, I think part of the problem from Richard's perspective was that the movie didn't have much funding for promotion, and the company that produced it really botched it. This was actually produced by the Scotti Brothers Record Company, which had bands like John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band that did songs for Rocky IV and things like that, and Cobra, and did stuff for Rock Stallone's movies, which I can understand that they botched the execution of promoting the movie. But if you watch this, I think you'll be like, damn, man, this was good. And Sarandon delivers this incredible performance. I love it so much. They actually had reversible artwork, which this was the reversible artwork. The other artwork was this, which might have been the VHS artwork. I don't know if that was or not, but they actually had, it's so crazy because I remember saying just when I got this, like a day or so later, I wonder if they had reversible art. Sure enough, Justin Osborne did art for this. Like, what? So I wonder if this was going to be a special edition and then nothing happened, but they already paid for the art from Justin, so they just used it. I don't know, but listen, if you don't pick up anything that I've shown you today so far, pick this up. I guarantee you, it'll kick your ass. Next up, guys, again, this came out from Scream Factory. Would it be cool to have a 4K of this? Maybe, maybe so. I wouldn't be upset if it got announced. I could see Kino Lorber probably announcing it. But if not, this Blu-ray is perfectly fine. Fire in the Sky, y'all. I mean, Fire in the Sky, I think there's only one movie that kind of comes close to being this good, and that's Communion with Christopher Walken. But when it comes to alien abduction stuff, the less said, the best said. You guys already know. I'm sure you've at least heard of this movie. Even if you haven't seen it, you've heard of the legacy and how great this movie is. Yeah, Scream Factory just kind of popped this one out, and then boom. And I think because it wasn't promoted as a collector's edition, a big thing where you can get posters and stuff, people were just kind of like, or they didn't give it much thought or focus and forgot about it. But I implore you to pick this up. There was actually some cool stuff. There was interviews with the director, Robert Lieberman, actor D.B. Sweeney, and Robert Patrick has an interview on here. So, I mean, cool. It's not a new interview, but they do have an interview with Robert Patrick on here. So, I mean, it was a good Blu-ray. It looked really good. It's not marketed as a 2K scan of this or that, but I can tell you picture quality-wise, you'll be more than happy with it. I mean, quite frankly, it looked really good. So, yeah, pick up Fire in the Sky. I feel like there'll be some people that watch this that may say, oh, that did come out. I completely forgot about it. Pick this up. I mean, this is one of those titles where it's like, even special features, it's one thing, but it's just like, oh, yeah, I need to own that on HD. So, next up, guys, I remember this movie went out of print, then it kind of came back in print. It's got Phantom of the Opera. I mean, this was a Dwight Little movie, 1989, starring Robert Englund. This is a great little movie. I mean, I really, really enjoyed it. I remember when this came out, I was just like, man, that cover art's amazing, and it just looks like Freddy with the skull on the back. Yeah, really, really great movie. The less said, the best said about this. I mean, you guys obviously know what this is about, a huge play. This is a play on the play with Robert Englund. Really cool for him to do this kind of movie during this time. He might have done this. He might have filmed this before. I think he probably filmed this right after Dream Child, or he did this right before. He might have done part 4, and then right after he got done filming part 4, he might have gone into filming Phantom, and then after Phantom, gone into Dream Child. I'm not sure. The timeline's a little wishy-washy in my head. But when it comes to Robert Englund movies, if you're like, Christian, what would you recommend from him that's not A Nightmare on Elm Street? I mean, at the top of the list would be The Phantom of the Opera, which I think he just does a great job in. So yeah, check this out, guys. This should still be in print. It was out of print, and then it just kind of came back in print. And so I'm hoping that you guys can get this pretty easily. And if not, hopefully on eBay you can get it at a good price. I don't foresee this getting a re-release anytime soon, but like I said, I think that still might be in print. Next up, guys, when it comes to the werewolf movies, I'm with you. I think, there's always going to be the 2 titles you want to talk about, The Howling and American Werewolf, but there's some other really good ones. One of them is Wolfen, which I think is criminally underrated. The other is Bad Moon, which I wouldn't even say is really underrated because the fans are pretty rabid for this, but there's always going to be somebody that can see this and be like, oh, what's that? This movie has everything going against it. Mid-90s, right at a time where Scream is a big thing, and it's a werewolf movie, which probably seemed so dated by this point. It might have even seemed dated by the time Howling and American Werewolf came out, but it was done so well that people were just like, damn, and it brought things to a new evolution. So this movie is the most incredible werewolf design you'll ever see, or one of them. It's guy in a suit, and it's animatronic stuff, and it is crazy. This is the one time where you get to see like a werewolf in a 2-story house with the lights on, and it actually looks as jarring as you think it would in terms of just like, this is terrifying. And because it's so in your face in the movie, it kind of gets under your skin and freaks you out a little bit. It's like, holy shit, imagine if that was real. So good. It's almost kind of like a Dennis the Menace meets The Howling. The kid's not a menace, but he looks like him, is my point. There's a kid in this movie that kind of just has his Dennis the Menace look, but he's not a menace, so to speak. Good little backstory, a little bit of a twist that you kind of see coming, but it doesn't bother you. I promise you it won't bother you. Really good movie, Bad Moon, guys. And last but not least, I hope this is still in print. Again, it's a movie that I think everybody should see. Maybe not necessarily own, because it may not be something that you'll want to watch again. But for me, I'd be remiss not to talk about the Poughkeepsie tapes. I consider this to be one of the scariest found footage movies of all time. I know that's completely subjective, and some people kind of give me a little bit of grief over that. I get it. But I mean, I can't help what scares me. And the voyeuristic feel, there's a scene in this movie where the killer hides in this girl's closet, which was kind of reminiscent of a BTK story, the serial killer, where this girl brings a guy over. He's hiding in the girl's closet and essentially waits for the guy to leave. And the visuals of this guy wearing these plague doctor masks when he's doing all this horrific stuff to these poor women in the basement, it's truly disturbing. But I think it's an important found footage movie. It kind of has this lore because it really had distribution issues. It wasn't so much that it was banned, and they really go into that big time on the special features of this, which is really great. But this movie definitely has a reputation. So I think just consider it, consider it, look into it. And if you want to take my word for it, I say go for it. I mean, I don't think you'll regret buying this, whether you enjoy watching it that often. I think you'll watch it and say, damn, I mean, this was something else. So there you go, guys. Those are some non-slip Scream Factory titles, which, like I said, there's a lot of in my collection that I would love to talk about that I haven't before. And there's more. There's movies like Strays and other like TV movies that they put out that are really cool stuff. So I'd love to talk more about that, guys. If you enjoyed this, please give me a thumbs up down below and let me know, and I'd be more than happy to do more. For now, though, this is your old pal CHH. Guys, take care, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye. Huge giant thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. Without you guys, this would not be possible. To get behind the scenes photos, videos, music, private live streams, and much more, you can subscribe to my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Thank you to my patrons.